Welcome to Adult Sleep Stories, where your day ends and your dreams begin. Tonight, let go of the noise, slow your breath, and follow the sound of my voice into a world beyond the ordinary. This is your time to unwind, drift deeply, and dream wildly. Let's begin. Tonight, you're invited to drift into a gentle story by the water's edge, where memories meet the shoreline and time softens like footprints in the sand. Set along the quiet paths of Park Point Beach, the locks we leave behind follows one woman's day of solitude by the lake. She didn't come here searching for anything, but sometimes the heart remembers on its own. As sunlight dances on the waves and love locks shimmer in the breeze, she'll revisit the chapters of her life, the ones that shaped her, broke her open, and taught her how to let go. And through it all, the lake listens. This is a story of reflection, of first love and last longing, of the kind of connection that never fully disappears. So settle in, let your body grow still, let your breath slow, and if you've ever loved someone who lives only in memory, this story is for you. Now close your eyes and let's begin. I didn't come here looking for anything. Not clarity, not comfort, certainly not answers. I just woke up with a weight in my chest and a restlessness in my limbs. The kind that makes the house feel too loud even when it's silent. So I pulled on the softest clothes I could find, grabbed an old tote bag with a pen and a book I probably won't open, and drove to the place I always seem to end up when I don't know what else to do. The very far end of Park Point. I didn't plan to walk far, and I didn't even check the weather, which is unlike me. But the sky looked gentle when I left. High clouds, and just warm enough in the light to make me think the lake might behave today. I parked near the dune path and stepped out barefoot, the gravel of the lot poking at my heels before I reached the wood of the boardwalk. It groaned softly under my feet, just like always. I paused and looked down the long stretch of weathered planks leading toward the water. There's something about this place. I can't tell you exactly what it is. Maybe it's the way the air smells, clean and quiet, like sand and time. Maybe it's the way the light moves across the water, always shifting, always hiding and revealing. Maybe it's just that I've been coming here long enough to feel known by it. The fence came into view a few steps in, the one people tie locks to, lovers mostly, though I've never seen anyone actually putting one on. They just appear, quiet declarations. Some are shiny and new, others are rusted and sagging, like they've outlived the very promises they were meant to protect. I've walked past them dozens of times. Today, I stopped. I don't know why. Maybe it was the one with a bright blue ribbon tied to it, fluttering like it had something urgent to say. Maybe it was the little brass one shaped like a heart with no writing on it at all. Or maybe it was the silence I felt as I stood there, looking. not at the locks themselves, but at the spaces between them. What do people hope for when they leave things like that behind? That their love will hold? That someone will remember them? That time can be pinned down like a page in a scrapbook? I don't know. I just know that I didn't come to add mine. I don't even know what mine would be. I continued down the path, slow and deliberate. The wind shifted slightly, brushing against my neck. The scent of lake water mixed with something faintly sweet. Early wildflowers, maybe, or whatever was blooming in the dunes. As I crested the final slope before the sand, I caught my first full view of the lake. Wide and slow today. That rare glassy stillness that makes the water feel infinite. A single kayaker cut a long, quiet path far in the distance. Otherwise, it was empty. I stepped down onto the sand, sinking a little as I went. It was warm, but not hot, packed, damp from yesterday's rain. I found a spot near a driftwood log and dropped my bag beside it, sinking into the sand with a sigh I hadn't realized I was holding. The breeze settled around me like a shawl. The waves whispered, low and rhythmic. And for the first time in what felt like days, I stopped moving. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't open the book. I didn't scroll or call or busy myself with anything. I just sat. I looked at the water. I listened to the wind. I let my body be held by the earth. This, I thought, is what I've been missing. Not an answer, not a solution, just stillness. Just me. I don't know when I stopped being comfortable in my own company. I used to crave time alone. Before the house was full of needs and noise, before schedules and alarms and other people's priorities dictated the rhythm of my days. Back then, I'd take long walks just to hear my own thoughts. I'd sit in coffee shops with a notebook and a single cup of tea and no desire to be anywhere else. Lately, even when I'm alone, I'm not really with myself. There is always something buzzing, a worry, a regret, a list of things I haven't done, or a memory I didn't mean to wake up. But here, now, with the waves folding over themselves like lazy pages, I feel a part of me begin to soften. But here, now, with the waves folding over themselves like lazy pages, I feel a part of me begin to soften. I think about the chapters of my life, not with grief, not yet, but with a sort of curious detachment, like a reader flipping through a story they almost forgot they wrote. There was the girl who believed everything would happen on time, that she would meet someone, fall in love, build a home, stay, that she'd know how to raise kids and keep a marriage and never lose herself in the process. Then there was a woman who discovered how fragile things really were, the one who stared at the wall at 3 a.m., listening to the soft breath of a sleeping child, and wondering if she'd ever feel like herself again. And the woman after that, the one who started over, who said, "Finally, enough," who packed boxes and signed papers and tried to rebuild something out of nothing. That's the woman I am now. A little bruised, a little wiser, still learning how to want things, still surprised by the way joy shows up when you stop chasing it. I lean back against the log and let the wind move through me. And for the first time in a long time, I feel present. Not racing ahead, not slipping back, just here, at a lake, with no intention and no idea what's coming. It started with a sound, a laugh, faint, distant, carried by the wind. Not even close to where I was sitting, just a ripple of it, like someone had let go of something joyful without meaning to. It wasn't his laugh, but for a second my chest tightened as if it could have been. I didn't even realize I'd turned my head until I noticed my eyes scanning the sand beyond the dunes. Looking, hoping. No, just noticing. But that one moment, that laugh, it unlatched a small, forgotten door inside of me. And behind it was him, Liam. There it was, the thought I hadn't come here to think, the name I hadn't said out loud in years. It slid in, soft as a tide, uninvited maybe, but not unwelcome. I looked back toward the water. I didn't fight it, I didn't force it. I just let him arrive, the way memories do when you're tired of resisting them. I remembered his voice first, low and warm and a little rough around the edges, like someone who'd smoked in college but quit before it did any real damage. I remembered the way he tilted his head when he was trying to understand you. Like he wasn't just hearing your words, he was measuring them, holding them up to the light. He never interrupted, never rushed. He gave silence the space to stretch. It unnerved me at first. I wasn't used to being listened to like that. We met the year after my divorce. I wasn't looking. I wasn't open. I wasn't anything but exhausted and hollow and trying my best to pretend I was fine. I'd finally found a rhythm again, my own rhythm. I was learning how to be a whole person after years of only being halves of things. Half a wife, a mother, caretaker, a scheduler of appointments, and a finder of missing shoes. Then he came along, and for a while, everything shifted. I could see it so clearly now, like a film reel playing in a quiet room. A coffee shop, the clink of ceramic, the shuffle of someone bumping a chair leg. He was sitting alone at the table beside me, scribbling in a notebook, head down. I remember the curve of his handwriting, loose, slanted. He looked up and I looked away too quickly. Later, he'd tell me how he noticed I never finished my tea. "You always let it go cold," he'd say, smiling into the rim of his own mug, like you're waiting for the right moment and then missing it. He wasn't teasing, he was just noticing. That was the thing about Liam. He noticed everything. And me, I didn't want to be seen then. Not really. I wasn't ready for anyone to hold me in their eyes. But somehow, he didn't ask for anything. He just offered space. And something in me leaned toward it. I never meant to fall in love again, especially not with someone like him. Someone so unlike the life I'd known. He was unanchored, unattached, constantly traveling for freelance writing gigs or documentary work. He lived light out of a suitcase, with a camera bag slung over one shoulder and a journal always half full of thoughts that he never shared out loud. He scared me, honestly. Not because he was reckless, but because he made me want things I'd buried. Peace, intimacy, a future I didn't have to narrate or manage or fix. He made me feel soft again. That summer we shared wasn't long. 3 months, maybe 4, depending on how you measure time. But it was deep and slow, sacred. We spent mornings here on this very beach. He liked to write things in the sand, poems, dates, words he never explained. He'd hand me a piece of driftwood and nod toward the blank shore like it was ours to fill. One day he wrote, "Not everything has to last to mean something." He didn't ask me to read it. He just stood there beside me as the tide washed it away. I didn't answer, but I remember touching his wrist. That was my answer. I blinked, returning to the present. The beach around me hadn't changed, but I had. My breath had deepened. My eyes felt warm. The air seemed to hum differently. It's strange how the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. I picked up a smooth, flat stone at my side and turned it over in my palm. It was ordinary. No carvings, no message, just a stone. But I had held it like it might tell me something anyways. I hadn't thought of him in months, maybe longer, not actively, not on purpose. But now, with the lake breathing steadily in front of me and the locks behind me whispering secrets into the wind, he was here again. Not in the flesh, not in some imagined reunion, just here, inside me, still. He left quietly. That's what I remember the most. Not a fight, not a farewell laced with drama. Just the slow unraveling of something too delicate to hold when life started pulling at the seams. His sister had gotten sick. I never met her, but he spoke of her often. She said he was his mirror, same eyes, same streak of sarcasm, same habit of disappearing into books when things got hard. Ovarian cancer, stage 4. Diagnosed late, like it so often is. He told me on a Tuesday while we were sitting in his car at Brighton Beach, parked beneath a cloud-thick sky that threatened rain but never followed through. I was sipping a lukewarm drink, curled slightly toward him. I remember his hands on the wheel, even though the engine was off. "I have to go," he said, without looking at me. I nodded. I didn't ask what go meant, because I already knew. There were texts, late night calls, a letter tucked into my mailbox with a photograph of a hiking trail. He would go to her in Oregon to help, to witness, and to hold space. Because that's who he was, the kind of person who showed up, no matter how messy or hard. He showed up until he couldn't, until he had to leave someone else behind. He promised to call, to write, to come back. And he did, at first. There were texts and late night calls, a letter tucked into my mailbox with a photograph of a hiking trail they used to walk together when they were kids. He told me he would read her poetry at night, even when she was too tired to listen, that she liked hearing his voice, even if the words didn't land. I wrote back. I sent care packages full of tea bags and books, a scarf I knitted on impulse, even though he'd never seen me knit a day in his life. Then the messages got shorter and fewer. One day they stopped. No explanation, no closure, just silence. And I let it happen. Not because I stopped caring, but because I didn't know how to chase someone through grief. I didn't want to ask for more from someone who was already giving everything they had to someone else. So I let him drift, and he never drifted back. A part of me always expected he would, even when I moved on, even when I said I'd stopped waiting. I thought maybe one day the phone would ring. I'd hear that voice again, low and steady and tentative, like it had aged without hardening. But it didn't. Years passed. I dated someone else for a while, a teacher, kind and grounded. But he didn't ask me questions I didn't know how to answer. He didn't challenge the way I softened when I didn't need to. And I didn't love him, not fully, not deeply. Eventually we ended things, gentle and clean, no mess. Just the kind of parting that happens when two people quietly realize they're not who the other is reaching for in the dark. I kept working, kept parenting, kept living, but I never quite let go of Liam. Not really. He became the quiet corner of my life I didn't talk about, a room I kept closed but never locked, a song I'd never skip if it came on by accident. And now here I was, years later, on this beach, alone in every way that matters, with his name echoing softly in the back of my mind. I looked down at the stone still in my hand. I'd forgotten I was holding it, smooth and round, cool despite the sun. I traced the edge of it with my thumb, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I pressed it to my heart. I thought about the version of me who loved him then, the woman who still cried at commercials and burned grilled cheeses and couldn't sleep without a book on the nightstand. The one who believed, maybe for the first time, that love could be simple. I missed her. Not because she was younger, but because she was brave in a way I didn't realize at the time. Open, curious, willing to risk her heart even after everything it had just survived. The wind kicked up again, brushing against the back of my neck. I looked toward the lake, which had darkened slightly, small ripples forming across the surface. I pulled my sweater tighter around me and leaned back into the sand, letting the moment pass through me. I didn't know what this day was supposed to be. I hadn't come here to grieve or to reflect or think about him at all. But maybe some memories don't need permission. Maybe they wait, like low tide, like breath. And when the space is quiet enough, when the waves are calm and the body stops resisting, they return. Not to haunt, just to remind. The sun shifted while I wasn't watching. I noticed it when I looked at my shadow and saw that it had stretched. Longer now, thinner, tracing a quiet path behind me like a second spine. The sky was softening too, losing its high noon sharpness. Everything had a golden wash like time had been dipped in honey. I shifted in the sand, the driftwood at my back pressing into my shoulder blades, grounding me. I hadn't moved much. My legs were numb from sitting too long, but I didn't mind. There was something about the stillness. I didn't want to break it. There's a kind of quiet that comes in midlife no one tells you about. It's not the silence of loneliness, not exactly. It's the hush after the noise, after the decades of doing and fixing and caretaking and proving. It's the moment when you realize no one is coming to ask you who you are anymore. You have to decide for yourself. That realization can be terrifying or freeing, or, like most things in life, both. I used to think I'd feel more finished by now, more certain, more secure, like there'd be a ribbon around the version of myself I was meant to be, a nice tight bow to tie it all together. But all I feel is more porous, more undone in the best and worst ways. I cry more easily now, but I also laugh harder. I forgive myself faster, even when I still forget to water my plants or return phone calls. I've stopped pretending I enjoy things I don't. I've stopped making small talk when I want to talk big. I've learned to let myself want, not in that desperate, clawing way of youth, but gently, honestly, quietly. I want to be held without being handled. I want to be chosen without being chased. I want to be remembered even when I'm not convenient. That's what Liam did in his own way. He remembered me when I'd forgotten myself. He saw the parts I thought I had to hide, the softness, the stubbornness, the way I flinched when someone reached for me too quickly. He saw them and he didn't try to fix them. He just stayed until he couldn't. I don't fault him for that anymore. We all leave, one way or another, sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally, sometimes both. And yet, we also remain. I don't know if he ever loved me in the way I loved him. I think he did, but I also think he was afraid of needing someone again after watching someone he loved disappear right in front of him. I understood that fear. I carried my own version of it. Different story, same ache. I never told him this, but I used to rehearse goodbyes in my head while he slept beside me. I'd picture myself walking away first, saying the right thing, ending it before he had a chance to. But I never did, because I never wanted to see how the story ended, even if it hurt. I looked up at the sky now, clear and wide, with just a few faint wisps drifting toward the horizon. A seagull floated lazily above the dunes. The water had darkened again, just slightly, like it was deep in thought. Everything felt suspended, like the day had paused to let me catch up with myself. I wondered, not for the first time, if he thought of me. Not in any dramatic or obsessive way, just sometimes, quietly, in between the tasks of a day, while folding laundry or driving or pouring coffee, the way I thought of him. A flicker, a breath, a memory that didn't ask for attention, only acknowledgement. We never said goodbye. Not properly. But maybe not all love stories need endings. Maybe some of them are meant to float in the middle, unfinished and undiminished. Not meant to be resolved, only remembered. I don't know if we get many soulmates in a life. Maybe just one, maybe a few, maybe none, and we're just trying to build something close enough with someone willing. But Liam was the one who reached the deepest part of me without digging. He didn't ask me to become anyone new. He just offered space for who I already was. That kind of love that doesn't expire. It just changes shape, like driftwood, like tide lines, like the woman I've become. I looked down at the sand beside me and ran my finger through it, and wrote nothing in particular, just a line, a mark, proof maybe that I had been here. Then I erased it with the side of my hand. No one needed to know. That part was just for me. If he were here now, really here, he'd be standing barefoot at the water's edge, sleeves pushed to his elbows, hands in his pockets the way he always stood when he didn't know what to say but felt everything anyways. He wouldn't rush toward me. He never did. He'd wait until I noticed him, and I would. Not because I'd be looking for him, but because my body would feel it first. That shift in the air, that thrum beneath the surface, like the lake catching its breath. That's how it always was with him, felt before seen. We'd probably stand in silence for a while. I'd brush the sand from my palms. He'd nod at the horizon. Maybe he'd say something like, "The lake looks old today," and I'd answer with something equally vague, equally true. We wouldn't need much more. He was never the grand gesture type. He once told me, "I don't trust fireworks, I trust lanterns, slow and steady, carried by breath." And we were like that, a lantern love, soft, suspended, gone before anyone noticed. I think about what might have happened if he had stayed. If his sister hadn't gotten sick, if he'd asked me to come with him, if I'd say yes, if we'd braved through it together. I picture the house we might have rented somewhere near the coast, close enough to the water that the windows fogged with salt, with books stacked in every corner and grocery list scribbled on paper napkins. Sunday mornings with soft jazz and his bare feet moving across the kitchen floor. My tea on the stove, his hand brushing the back of my neck as he passed. Conversations that never rushed, arguments that never bruised, sleep tangled with forgiveness, and laughter. Always that. God, we used to laugh. He had this dry, sideways humor that caught you off guard. The kind that didn't need punchlines. The kind that made the ordinary shimmer. I remember one night we sat in my car for 2 hours watching a thunderstorm over the lake. We didn't say a word until it passed, and he looked at me, deadpan, and said, "I think the lake just confessed something." I laughed so hard I cried, and then I cried harder, and he held my hand and said nothing, which was everything. Maybe that was our whole story. Nothing too loud, nothing too obvious. Just steady threads weaving through a life that almost was. And maybe it's foolish to sit here and imagine it now. But maybe it's also holy. To make space inside yourself for what could have been. To let the memory of someone you loved stretch out and breathe. Not to hold on, but to honor. I don't think of Liam as a ghost. I think of him as a parallel life, one that runs beside mine, quietly, like a shadow at golden hour. Always close, never quite touching. Sometimes, when I feel untethered, I wonder if that shadow life thinks of me too. I looked back toward the fence of Lover's Locks, just barely visible now through the curve of the dunes, a glittering line of metal and memory. I wondered if he ever came back here. If he ever stood on this boardwalk with his hands in his pockets, trying to decide whether to leave something behind. If he ever clipped a lock to the fence. If he did, I'd never know which one it was. Unless he left it blank. No initials, no engraving, just presence. That would be like him. Something quiet and something steady. something that didn't need to be named to be known. I don't need him to come back. That's the truth I've been circling all afternoon. It's taken me hours to say it, even silently. But there it is, a sentence soft as sea glass, worn down from the edges of harder thoughts. I don't need him to return or call or send a sign. I don't need a letter in my mailbox or a sudden tap on my shoulder. I don't need the cinematic ending, the chase, the reunion, the swell of music and arms wrapping around lost time. I just needed to remember that I loved and that I still can. There is a grief in knowing that some people are never coming back, not because they've died, but because that part of your life they fit into had closed like a book, and you can't reread it the same way anymore, even if you try. Liam was a chapter like that. Not a footnote, not a metaphor. A full, complicated, beautiful chapter. One I return to now and then, not to rewrite it, but to feel the warmth between the lines. We said things with our silences. We made meaning with our pauses. We loved each other with a caution that looked like grace. And maybe that's enough. It has to be. I don't fault him for leaving. I don't fault myself for letting him. We were two people who met at the wrong kind of time. Right for waking something up, wrong for building something that could last. And yet, something in me still believes he loves me, fully, quietly, the way a person loves when they already lost too much. And I loved him back, without needing him to prove anything. That's not something I've said out loud before, not even to myself. But now, here on this beach, with the wind brushing against my lips and the sun beginning its slow descent, I feel safe enough to say it in my own mind. I loved him. He changed me. He's gone, and I'm still here. Still breathing, still aching sometimes, still capable of something soft. But for now, I stay still. I draw a spiral in the sand beside me with my finger. Not a symbol, just movement. I watch the grains fall away as I trace the lines inward, over and smaller until there's nothing left but the center. That's how I feel now, like I've reached the center of something. Not the end, not closure, just the still point. The moment where memory no longer asks to be grieved, only held. Forgiveness is quiet, I've learned. It doesn't arrive with banners or clean slates. It slips in like sunlight between the blinds. It finds the places inside you where pain used to live, and it opens a window there. I forgive him for not staying. I forgive myself for hoping he might. And I forgive time for passing the way it does, for taking things we thought we'd keep, for teaching us how to live with longing without letting it swallow us whole. The beach is still quiet, but I can hear people farther down, laughing, calling out. Life moving like it always does. just beyond the edge of my stillness. I'm not part of it right now, and that's okay. The space, the one in between remembering and letting go, it's sacred, rare, necessary. I'm not trying to hold on to anything. I'm just making room. The wind had changed, subtle but sure. The lake, which had been still and glassy most of the afternoon, now shimmered with tiny waves catching the light. The air smelled of driftwood and iron and something green I couldn't name. I knew then it was time to stand up. Not to leave, not yet, but to move, to stretch, to shift something in the body after everything that had shifted in my mind. I brushed the sand from the backs of my legs, pulled my sweater tighter, and began walking toward the boardwalk again. Back toward the fence, back toward the locks. They came into view slowly, rising out of the curve of the dune path like a row of quiet sentinels. The wind made a low metallic hum as it passed over them, like breath moving through old bells. They were just objects, just locks. But God, they looked like a poem. I stood in front of them and let my eyes wander. One had pink glitter fading to rust. One had chipped white paint and a child's scribbled handwriting. Another had no marking at all, just a thin green ribbon knotted tightly through the loop. They weren't declarations. They were records of what once was, of what someone dared to hope for, of something held. I didn't plan to bring anything. I hadn't written his name. I didn't have a key. But somewhere deep in my bag, tucked beside a notebook and a lip balm I never used, I knew there was a lock. I carried it everywhere without realizing it. I pulled it out slowly. It was plain, brass, small, the kind you'd use for a locker or a suitcase. I couldn't even remember when I bought it, only that I never threw it away. Maybe I'd always known this moment would come. I turned it over in my hand a few times. There was nothing to engrave, no initials to etch. I didn't want to date. This wasn't about then. This was about now. I reached for the wire and found a small space between two pink faded locks. I paused, let my fingers hover, then clipped mine into place. It clicked, soft and final. Not a promise, not a plea, just a mark. We loved. I remember. And I'm still here. I stood with it for a while, letting the wind move around me, letting the light shift across the water. There was nothing dramatic about it, no emotional flood, just a slow, gentle exhale. Then I smiled. Not a wide smile, not a sad one either. Just the kind that happens when you've made peace with something you didn't think you ever would. I stepped back, tucked my hands into my sleeves, and walked the path again. Back to the sand, back to the water, back to the quiet. I returned to the beach slowly, retracing the path I had taken hours ago. only now the sun had lowered its gaze. The air had cooled slightly, and the sand under my feet was laced with shadows. It was the same place, but I was different. Not in a dramatic epiphany kind of way, just quieter, clearer, like someone who had finally said something they needed to say, even if no one was there to hear it. I sat again near the driftwood log. The lake was darker now, tinged with rose and pewter, the kind of light that makes you feel like something important is ending, even if you can't name what. I let my toes dig into the sand, cool now, and watched the water move. This beach, this day, none of it had gone the way I expected. But maybe that's what made it matter. I didn't come here to think of Liam. I didn't plan to open that door again. But memory has a tide of its own. You don't always get to choose when it returns. And when it does, if you let it, it can carry you to the very center of yourself. That's what this day had done. Not brought him back, not changed the past, but brought me back to the woman who still remembers, still hopes, and still feels. There are days I miss him more than I let on. Mornings when I wake up with his name just under my tongue, like a dream I didn't finish. Even now, I wonder sometimes if he's out there. If he ever made it back here. If he left a lock somewhere, tucked in a corner, blank and quiet in his. If he still listens to the playlists we used to share. If he thinks of me when the sky turns gold. I'll never know. And strangely, I'm okay with that. Because love isn't always about reunion. Sometimes it's just about return. The kind that happens inside of you. The kind that doesn't need to be witnessed to be real. I don't know if I'll ever see him again. Maybe we'll meet by accident one day, in a bookstore or a train station, or another beach in another life. Maybe we will smile without speaking, just two people who knew each other once. Maybe we'll pass without knowing at all. Or maybe we'll find each other again at the end, when everything falls away and only the truest things remain. I don't need to know. I just need to remember. The lake whispered again, soft and steady, endless. And I whispered back. Then I stood. I walked slowly toward the water, just until it touched my feet, cool and certain. The waves wrapped around my ankles like a blessing. And I breathed. Not because I was healed, not because I was whole, but because I was here. And that was enough.